Welcome to the Darkstream. Voxday, voxday.blogspot.com, and unauthorized.tv. Good evening. Not very organized tonight. I actually wasn't going to do a Darkstream, and then I realized that I hadn't done one in a couple days, and so I thought, well, if nothing else, I should at least pop in and let everyone know that that we're doing fine. Corona-chan has not interfered with our lives at all, and we're doing well. So, a couple things. This is not going to be a particularly long one. I've got some stuff that I need to do. Still need to do, but I was reflecting on some things relating to what we've had to do in order to be successful, what we've had to do in order to continue to be successful, and why we need to be constantly changing and evolving and adjusting to the new reality that's out there. As you're probably aware, my dad was released from prison recently, and it's interesting to get some perspective on how much things have changed in 10 years, because really it's astonishing if you go back and look at some of the things that we take for granted now that didn't even really exist, or at least were not significant 10 years ago. And obviously, that's not even getting into the whole changes that are going to result from the coronavirus and all the stuff that's going on internationally. And so what I'm talking about here, this ability to adjust and to accommodate yourself to the changing circumstances, is probably going to become more important, not less important, as time goes on. We've been criticized, not by very many people, but by a few stubborn individuals, inhibit your ability to be successful. We didn't plan that after the campaign was successfully completed, that Indiegogo was going to refuse to pay us. When we started doing the Castalia Library, we certainly didn't plan that all of the leather supplies from Italy were going to get stuck in Italy so that they couldn't get to the binder and get bound. Now, I do have some good news on that front. The cowhides for the first book, which of course is The Missionaries by Owen Stanley, have arrived, and the bindery is going to start binding them next week. So it looks good. It looks like there's a decent chance that we will get those first books out before the end of this month. But there's no guarantees. That's why it's a little frustrating at times when people keep saying, well, when is this going to be ready? When is this going to be ready? Like, I mean, I appreciate the enthusiasm, but we're going to tell you when it's ready. We will tell you repeatedly when things are ready. Now obviously most people don't do this. There's literally thousands of people involved in all of these things. But it's always the same type of individual who just can't seem to wrap their heads around the fact that asking, especially asking repeatedly, doesn't help at all. And so, I'm beginning to understand the wisdom of John Romero and John Carmack when they took the approach, it will be done when it's done. And, we will get everything done. We're just methodically working through all this stuff. We're half done with the Alt Hero stuff now. We're half done with the Avalon stuff now, and we just keep moving forward. We just keep banging things out, one project at a time. And I'm obviously not delighted about the fact that these things all seem to take longer than we wanted them to, or than we thought they would. But there's no getting around it. Yeah, it is. I mean, it is a fundamentally childish, either characteristic or personality. The whole, are we there yet? Are we there yet? I mean, we want to get there too. We really do. We really want to, get this stuff out there and working, but it's not going to do anybody any good to give people access to things if they're not going to work properly. And anybody who says, "Oh, well, all you have to do is put these things together," I mean, they have no idea what they're talking about. None whatsoever. And not only that, but most of these folks who want to criticize, they do not understand not only the complexity of the issues that you're dealing with, but they definitely don't understand the significance of the opposition. Everything that we do has to be bulletproof, because if it's not, the SJWs at all these various institutions are going to, and organizations are going to interfere. If they're given half the chance, they will interfere. And this actually leads me to what I was going to talk about, or what I wanted to talk about with regards to evolution and success. I strongly social. What are the chances that, in addition to wrongly kicking people off their system, thanks to their trust and safety, what are the chances that Patreon isn't engaged in some kind of metrics-related fraud, right? Now, what I want you to do is I want you to go to a site, if you're on your computer, go to a site called Graphtreon. And I'm going to grab let's see if I can share this particular window with you. I think I can. I'm going to add a source. I'm not sure if I can. I'm not sure how this will work, but we're going to. I've done it before, but okay. Click the URL. This is a. They've added some new functionality here, so. Okay, there we go. It actually worked. So, this is Graphtreon, and this is something that shows you what sort of statistics are being reported from Patreon. Now, here's what's really interesting. We heard recently that a video was released by them. Jeremy of the Quartering addressed it, and he talked about how it seemed to indicate a certain degree of desperation on Patreon's part. And furthermore, we've heard anecdotally that a lot of creators are suffering because people are not supporting their Patreon They're not supporting their Patreon accounts as much, right? And so this is what was kind of fascinating when I looked it up. Oops, I didn't want that. I want the turn it on here. So supposedly in the last year, every month you can see that the number of patrons go up through the course of the month, and then at the end of the month, some people drop out, and then they build up again. So there's this pattern, right? Then all of a sudden, it got a little bit busy here in the October 2019 timeframe. And now right here, there's a big plunge right at the beginning of March. I mean, they went from a reported 13 million with 6.4 million pledges, and it bombed down, all the way down to 10 million with less than 6 million, about 5.5 million pledges. So at the same time that everybody was put on furlough and forced to stay in their homes and all this sort of thing, suddenly Patreon rockets upward and is apparently doing better, far better than they ever have. Now, ask yourself this. If an airline were to report that their business had increased 36% this month, would you believe them? Maybe if you're a manufacturer of masks and rubber gloves or something, but this is just really, really remarkable and frankly unlikely, especially if you look down here. Supposedly the number of creators has been flat for the last year, and then suddenly, boom, goes up by 40% since March 6th. Seem likely? I mean, maybe a whole bunch of people have turned to Patreon and so forth. That's certainly the narrative. But where are people finding the money to fund these things, right? And then this is what's particularly suspicious is, okay, so all the number of creators has increased by 40%, right? Now let's look at the total number of YouTube subscribers for those creators. So at the same time that the number of creators has gone up 40%, the number of YouTube subscribers enjoyed by those creators has dropped 63%. Now this doesn't prove anything, but it definitely tends to indicate that there might be some hinky business going on of the sort that we have seen and has been reported on the part of Twitter and Facebook and Google and everything else. So anyhow, this is just some interesting stuff that I think it's suspicious. Maybe it's all organic and natural, and there's nothing illegitimate about it, but it probably bears some further investigation, right? But this is what was interesting to me, and this is actually this was just the starting point. This isn't what I'm talking about tonight. I was looking at the list of the top creators, and what really struck me is that there was this creator who was bringing in an incredible amount of money every month, over $50,000 a month, and they were doing it in the comics category. Now, this was obviously somewhat suspicious to me because I thought, well, why would, how could somebody be bringing in that much money every month when I'm the person who has the biggest new comics related crowdfunding campaign ever? And I know the guy, not on very good terms with him, but I know Ethan Van Sciver, who has two of the biggest campaigns for an existing comic ever. So how is this even possible? And so I was thinking, I kind of smelled a rat, right? So I go and look at it, and it turns out that and this is not a comic I'd ever heard of, and not that I'm a big comics guy, but because we produce comics with Archaven and Dark Legion, I try to keep up on more or less what's going on. That's how I was up on Diamond not paying the Marvel and DC and IDW and everybody, and all the various cancellations and delays and so forth. But this was like a comic I'd never heard of, and then I went and followed the links, and it turns out that it's actually a very popular sort of mobile comic called Webtoon, and nobody's on there. I mean, none of the established comics are on there. It's all, I think it's out of Korea originally, and a number of people are producing some very popular, frankly, pretty amateurish comics that are doing extremely well. I mean, these are comics that they don't make any money in and of themselves, but they have such big followings, millions of likes, that they're able to do really well on subscription-based services. And so I thought, well, why aren't we on this? Why can't we be on this? How would we go about getting on this? And so what I did, let me see if I can get this going. What I did was I just started experimenting with it. It turns out it's actually pretty easy to do. I was a little bit surprised. I'm not sure they'll let me show you this, but just for kicks, I'll see if I can get it going. Okay. Be another way. Okay, here we go. So what's interesting is that it's a fairly simple process, and all you really have to do. Oh, they won't let you do that either. Oh well. Anyhow, it's a fairly simple process where you just basically pop up individual panels, and they're all done vertically rather than in page format. And so, what we're going to do is we're going to take a couple of our existing comics, because what I calculated is that an episode on Webtoon is about 1/4 of a conventional comic book, if you look at the way that the dialogue. Apparently it's the Korean manhwa system. And it's pretty effective. Oh, I know how I can show you. Let me see here. Unfortunately, I don't have R's on it because I haven't published any of them yet. But it's kind of a clever system that is very simple. The art tends to be pretty basic. So here's one of the popular science fiction ones, and let me see if you can see that or not. Yeah, so basically you just scroll up, and what they do is they break each panel separately. Sometimes they put the text on it, on the page itself. Other times most times they put the text, the dialogue, in between the various panels. And so, and this is not something that, we'd ever thought about. It's not like we were sitting there going, gee, can we come up with some new comics media, yet another way to get comics out there? That wasn't something that we were thinking about. But when we look at it, when we see what's what's happening, then we adjust. And who knows what's going to happen? What this is going to do, though, is it's probably going to make the Archaven subscription considerably more viable, because there's a lot more people that are interested in supporting that kind of system than in getting print comics. And so it's if we want to be successful, we have to be constantly looking at how we can turn on a dime and adjust how we do things in order to make it compatible with that. Now, the interesting thing is, of course, depending on how the artist constructs his particular illustrations and how we put them all together makes a big difference in how easy it is to convert. So, for example, the way that Matvei does the Quantum Mortis comic makes it very, very easy to construct these things. Boom, boom, boom. You can do it so easily. Whereas it's a little bit tougher with like the Avalon alt hero approach. And unfortunately, the way that Gary did the Jeeves comic, it's almost impossible. And so, so if you're on there, I'm actually hoping to tonight publish Chuck Dixon's Avalon #1, episode 1, The Street Rules, Straight Up Cash, I think is what we're going to call the first episode. And I'll be very interested to see what you guys make of it, see if you like that particular format or not. But, this isn't really for our existing fans. This is more for this new market, this new comics market that we don't know, and that we can't necessarily, that we're not familiar with. I'm curious to know what you mean by it's localized. I mean, how would it be localized? I mean, in what sense is it localized? Because everything seems to be just pure graphics. It doesn't seem like it has a separate text API or anything. So if I'm somehow missing something, we've successfully created 2 different episodes of 2 different comics in a fairly short amount of time. I mean, we could if you look at how much we have, like for example, we're now finished with 7 issues of Alt Hero, although Alt Hero 7 hasn't come out yet. Dr. Jeep says multiple language fonts. Now that you didn't understand what I'm talking about. If it's all graphic, then the multiple language, then you're just talking about 2 different, you're talking about substituting image files. Oh, okay, I see. I'm not missing anything apparently. Yeah, I was thinking is if there's something clever, like the ability to switch over the text and translate the text, there has to be some kind of API to use, but I haven't seen any API. It all just looks like load your images, and so maybe eventually they'll have something like that, but they don't yet. So anyhow, but it's interesting to see that some of you guys are already familiar with that, and it's going to be interesting to see how we can combine that with some of the other stuff that we're looking at doing. Now, obviously, I'm not normally going to be assembling these myself, but the best way for me to learn this stuff, is to experiment with it and actually get my hands dirty and figure out how to work with it. Anyhow, I see Webtoons is just the English release site. That makes sense. Yeah, I mean, there's tons of stuff on there, but there's nothing, there's no Marvel, there's no DC, there's no IDW, none of that stuff. And so, anyhow, the point is that if you want to be successful today, you're going to have to give up the idea that the way to be successful is to think about a plan, come up with a really good plan, and stick to it at all costs. Because that's what if you do that, you end up like Diamond and Marvel and all those companies that are in serious trouble right now because the distribution system is broken. If you're not ready. Rebel Without General says, when are you going to upload? I'm going to upload within an hour is my no that's not true. I'm going to upload within 2 hours. I mean, even if if I haven't finished all the stuff that I want to finish, I'm going to get a early version out there so that we can just in terms of the execution, because number one, I'm not a good artist, which is basically just take the whole page and stick it on there. The problem is that even if you have it perfectly attuned for the resolution for your tablet or your phone, it's hard to see. And so, these actually, this promises to work pretty well, and fortunately, it's very it's relatively easy to do. Jay Fred says, the variety of frame proportions on print comics pages are a big part of the drama excitement of comic books. Will this system make everything look like yet another PowerPoint? Not really. It's more limited in some ways, but it's less limited in others. Like, for example, if you want to have a really big, tall image, you can just string 3, 4, 5 images together and have one massive image. There's no reason why you can't do some of the funky stuff. It's just, and if you're an artist who has the right tools, it'd probably be very easy to make it look really good. But what we're looking at seriously doing, is we might actually make part of the Archaven subscription being a new comic that is designed specifically for this. I mean, you don't have to design to the platform. I mean, we've just proven with the conversion of Quantum Mortis and Avalon is we've proven that we can take our existing assets and turn them into webtoons without any trouble. But it would be more effective if we were able to, do a new comic that was done specifically for that. In fact, the legend Chuck Dixon and I were actually looking at the site together and discussing how we would go about writing stories for this, because how do you keep, Chuck could do it easily. He could keep up the pace, no problem at all. My speed would not be optimal, and some of the artists that we have would not be optimal for this, because we'd have to be many issues in advance in order to stay ahead. So, and then of course it needs to support itself. So are we going to see that kind of level of interest in what we're doing there? Who knows? But there's only not having to zoom in to read the text bubbles is a big plus for mobile. Yeah, exactly. It works very well. So I'm very interested in it. I think it's going to be intriguing to contemplate. But we'll have to see. We'll have to see how it goes. But this is the whole point, is that if we're going to be successful, we have to constantly be looking at these new platforms, at these new possibilities, at these new technologies, and we're doing all that. We're doing that with Unauthorized. We're doing that with Archaven. we're going back to some very old technology with the library, but I mentioned a bit that I might be doing a bit more game design again. Some of the stuff that we're working on there is how can we bring things to the table that will actually matter in terms of gameplay, so that it's not just yet another, well, it's like this popular game, but we added this one feature, because that doesn't work anymore. That doesn't, it used to be in the game industry, it used to be that taking an existing game, adding a feature or two, adding some different artwork and a different storyline or even different genre would suffice, because people would play the one game and they'd play through it, and then they'd want a bit more, so then they'd want some new features and stuff, so they'd go to another game. But now games are never ending. Games are really more platform experiences than individual games. And so, for example, the MMOs really, really transformed all this because they were dynamic rather than static. And so Dr. Jeep said, I heard that one feature thing a lot for a lot of self-declared EVE Online killers. Right, and the reason that they couldn't kill EVE Online is the same reason that Warhammer Online couldn't beat World of Warcraft. In the old world, in olden times, Warhammer would have been the natural successor to Warcraft. But because it was a dynamic MMO, the Blizzard was able to take the 2 or 3 really cool features that Warhammer had introduced and put them into the World of Warcraft game in a matter of months. And so it was easy for them to co-opt the competition. And that's why, we're on Call of Duty number 37 or whatever it is. The PUBG introduces the parachute drops, and Fortnite brings them in, and before long Call of Duty has it now. Call of Duty used to be more of a scripted game, like what do you call it? It used to be more like Half-Life. And so if you're going to do something that's going to matter, if you're going to do something that has any reasonable possibility of significant success, you have to make sure that you're bringing something very, very new to the table. Something that is not easily copied. And so that's what we're basically. It's kind of funny. I'm like the anti-salesman when it comes to games. People come and say, I want to make a game like this, and I've got this amount of money, and we're going to do this, and so I'm like, no, don't waste your money. One of the things that I still feel bad about was when Kurt Schilling decided to get into games and form 38 Studios. I talked to him, and I said, hey, if you need any help, if you want, whether it's on the design side or whether it's just on the due diligence side, I'll be happy to help out. And he's like, no, thanks, but we got a great team, and this, that, and the other thing. And he lost all his money, or at least quite a bit of it. Totally unnecessarily. They never should have gotten into doing most of the stuff that they ended up getting into. And he had some good people. He had some smart people, but he didn't have, kind of like Chris Roberts with Star Citizen. He didn't have the right person in the right place, limiting what people were trying to do. Because that's the challenge. You got to evolve, you got to change, but you also got to get stuff done in a reasonable time period. That's what we're trying to do. Right now the biggest scope limitation, exactly. I mean, I love Chris Roberts. I love Chris Roberts as a designer. I love what he wants to do and what he tries to do. But he needs a strong producer who's capable of saying, Chris, we can't do that. And so I mean, we were looking at Wing Commander Reboot before it was called Star Citizen, when he was still trying to put that together. And that was one of the concerns then, was that good design, I mean, obvious design, just bring back Wing Commander, put some decent AI in the wingmen. How hard is this? But the design got blown out of proportion. So scope creep, exactly. T. Greeny says, Vox, as a reader on Webtoons, I can tell you the competition is not much. There's about a dozen really good ones total, and I think you guys could clean up well. Yeah, I mean, that. To be honest, that was my perception too. That was definitely my perception too. So, anyhow, we're putting together a social galactic Oregon Star Citizen. Got 5 people so far. That's awesome. I like to hear that. Anyhow, those are my thoughts for tonight. I'm going to let you go so that I can mess around with trying to create these things. And so check out Webtoons and look for Chuck Dixon's Avalon in about 2 hours. So have a good evening. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Voxday, and this is the Darkstream.